A little wild foal kept following the mountain man. At first, he thought it was just a stray. But mile after mile, the animal refused to turn back until the whole town began whispering. Why would a ragged colt cling to a broken man who wanted nothing but to be left alone? When the church bell tolled and the cavalry rode in, the truth came crashing down. This foal wasn't just any horse. It carried secret stolen land, broken promises, and a past the mountain man tried to bury. Now, under the eyes of the law and the weight of the people, he faces a choice: surrender the animal and walk away, or protect it, even if it costs him his freedom. But when he finally realizes why the foal followed him, it shatters him to his knees. What bond ties a wild creature to a grieving man? And will that bond save him or destroy him? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Kent Carter trudged along the muddy trail, his worn boots leaving deep prints in the spring softened earth. The morning sun had barely cleared the mountain peaks when he first spotted the pitiful creature, a Kuanavalayer, scrawny foal with ribs showing through its dull coat. He'd hoped it would lose interest, but hour after hour, the persistent animal tottered after him like a shadow. Get on now. Kent's gruff voice echoed off the canyon walls. He scooped up a clod of dirt and hurled it toward the foal, deliberately. Missing, the colt skittered sideways but didn't flee. Instead, it waited until Kent resumed walking, then clip-clop behind him, its uneven steps betraying its weakness. Kent's shoulders tensed with each soft nickering sound from behind. He hadn't asked for company, hadn't wanted it. The solitude of his mountain shack suited him just fine. No expectations, no disappointments, no pain of losing what you foolishly allowed yourself to care about. The afternoon sun beat down his Kent's path wound through scrubby pine and sage. His canteen sloshed, nearly empty, reminding him to find water soon. The foal's labored breathing grew louder, its steps more uncertain. Kent refused to look back, but his pace slowed of its own accord. When he spotted a creek cutting through a small meadow, Kent veered off the trail. The sound of running water drew him to a spot where cottonwoods offered shade from the late day heat. He dropped his pack with a grunt and gathered wood for a fire, trying to ignore the foal that stood watching his every move from 20 paces away. "Ain't gonna be here long," Kent muttered, more to himself than the colt. "Just need some rest and a hot meal, then I'm gone." The foal's ears pricked forward at the sound of his voice. Kent got his fire going as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. The familiar smell of cooking beans rose from his battered tin pot. His stomach growled. He'd been walking since dawn with only jerky to sustain him in the gathering darkness. He could make out the foal's trembling form. It had edged closer to the firelight, drawn by warmth or hunger or both. Its eyes reflected the flames like amber coins. "Danger doll," Kent grumbled, fishing in his pack. He pulled out a heel of bread, stale and hard. With a sharp snap, he broke off a piece and tossed it toward the colt. The bread bounced once before the foal snatched it up, chewing eagerly. Kent tried not to notice how the animal's legs shook, how its hip bones jutted out like knife blades under its hide. He'd seen plenty of suffering in his years in the mountains. Wasn't his job to fix it all, but as night settled in and Kent wrapped himself in his bedroll, the foal remained at the edge of the firelight. It had settled onto its knees, head drooping with exhaustion. Kent rolled to face away from the sight, but sleep proved elusive. Memory ambushed him in the dark another spring night years ago, watching helplessly as fever took his young son, then his wife mere days later. He'd fled to the mountains after that, where the only thing that could hurt him was the cold. The pop of burning wood startled Kent from his dark thoughts. He heard the foal shift and let out a soft nicker. Without meaning to, Kent turned his head to look. The cold had settled closer to the fire, its thin frame illuminated by the dying flames. "You're gonna follow me anyway, ain't you?" Kent's words were barely a whisper. The foal's ear twitched in response. Morning came with dew and birdsong. Kent rolled up his bedroll and kicked dirt over the fire's ashes. The foal stood exactly where it had been, watching him with those two trusting eyes. When Kent shouldered his pack and headed toward town, the steady clip-clop of small hooves followed. He didn't throw any more clods of dirt, didn't shout or wave his arms. The rhythm of 4 feet behind his 2 became a steady companion as the sun climbed higher, marking their slow progress toward civilization. "Reckon you're just gonna have to learn the hard way," Kent said over his shoulder. "Ain't nothing but disappointment in following folks around, hoping they'll save you." But the foal just nickered softly and kept pace, its determination somehow stronger than its obvious weakness. Kent's jaw clenched against emotions he thought he buried years ago. He lengthened his stride as if he could outpace the unwanted. Feelings rising in his chest that the foal stumbled, caught itself, and hurried to catch up. Its hoofbeats on the trail might as well have been knocking on the door of Kent's hardened heart. Persistent, patient, refusing to be ignored. The spring sun climbed higher as Kent guided his mule down the dusty road into town. Every few steps, he heard the uneven clip-clop of the foal struggling to keep pace behind them. His jaw tightened as he noticed townsfolk pausing in their morning routines, pointing and whispering at the strange sight. Outside the general store, several men lounged on wooden chairs, their laughter carrying across the street. "Well, look who's come down from his mountain," one called out. And with the sorriest-looking colt I ever did see. Kent kept his eyes forward, ignoring their amusement. The foal stumbled on the hard-packed street, its weak legs trembling with exhaustion. He tried not to notice how its breathing had grown. Labored during their journey. The door of Henderson's Mercantile swung open, and Samantha Hamlin stepped out onto the wooden walkway, her arms full of supplies. She froze mid-step, her eyes fixed on the bedraggled animal behind Kent's mule. "That foal," she breathed, setting her packages down carefully. "It can't be." Her voice trailed off as she moved closer, studying the colt's distinctive white blaze and copper coat. Kent shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. The schoolteacher's intense gaze made him want to turn his mule around and head straight back to his cabin. "Mother," Samantha called urgently through the store's open door. "Mother, come quickly." Mrs. Hamlin appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face went pale as she caught sight of the foal. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, one hand flying to her throat. "That's Lady's gat, sure as I'm standing here." "Lady?" Ken asked, despite himself. "Our prize, Mari," Samantha explained, her voice tight with emotion. She was heavy with foal when those raiders took her 6 months ago. "We never thought." She moved closer to the colt, speaking softly to keep from startling it. Mrs. Hamlin stepped forward and gripped Kent's arm, her fingers strong despite their trembling. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Mr. Carter. He used you to bring this little one back to us." Kent shook his head, trying to pull away. "Ma'am, I don't want any part of. It found you for a reason," Samantha interrupted, her green eyes meeting his with unwavering certainty. "Look how it follows you. Won't leave your side, will it? Been trying to run it off since yesterday," Kent muttered. Mrs. Hamlin's grip tightened. "Providence brought this foal to you, Mr. Carter. The good Lord knows what he's about." Kent looked down at the two women, seeing the same stubborn determination in both their faces. The foal pressed closer to his mule, seeking shelter from the growing crowd of onlookers. "It needs care," Samantha said firmly. "Good feed, a warm stall, medicine for those cuts on its legs. And it's clear won't accept help from anyone but you." "I ain't no horse doctor," Kent protested, "and I got business to tend to." "The livery stable's just down the street," Samantha pressed. "Mr. Peterson keeps clean stalls and fresh hay. You can board it there while you're in town." Kent knew when he was fighting a losing battle. With a heavy sigh, he turned his mule toward the livery stable, the foal trailing faithfully behind. Samantha and Mrs. Hamlin followed, their boots raising small puffs of dust from the street dot at the stable entrance. Kent dismounted and tried to lead the foal inside. The animal planted its feet, trembling, eyes wide with fear at the dark interior. Kent clicked his tongue, tugged gently on its tangled mane, but the colt wouldn't budge. "Come on now," he growled. "I ain't got all day for your foolishness." Samantha stepped forward. "Try going in first," she suggested quietly. "It seems to feel safe only when you're near." Kent shot her an exasperated look, but walked into the stable. The foal's hooves clattered on the wooden floor as it hurried after him. Pressing close to his side, Mr. Peterson appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. "Got a nice stall open. Third one down. Fresh straw this morning." "Just temporary," Kent insisted, leading the foal to the indicated stall. "Until I finish my business in town." "Of course," Samantha agreed, but there was a knowing smile in her voice that made Kent's shoulders tense. The foal balked again at the stall entrance until Kent stepped inside. Only then did it follow, immediately turning to keep him in sight. "Reckon you'll have to back out slow-like," Mr. Peterson advised, "unless you're planning to spend the night in there with it." Kent managed to ease out of the stall, but his chest tightened at the soft, worried nickering from the foal. He found himself muttering, "It's all right now. You just rest easy." "We'll bring some supplies from the ranch," Mrs. Hamlin said. "That poor thing needs building up." Kent opened his mouth to object, but Samantha touched his arm lightly. "Let us help, Mr. Carter. Sometimes the Lord's blessings come with responsibilities we didn't expect." Kent strode down the dusty street, eager to put distance between himself and the livery stable. His boots kicked up small clouds with each determined step as he made his way toward the saloon. Behind him, he could still hear the foal's plaintive nickering fading into the morning bustle inside the saloon's dim interior. Conversations hushed as he entered. Kent ignored the stares, making his way to the bar where he ordered supplies, coffee, beans, and hardtack. As he waited, snippets of whispered conversations reached his ears. "Did you see that scrawny colt following him like it was branded?" One man muttered. Another chuckled. "Like his own shadow it is. Won't leave him be. Ain't natural, if you ask." A third voice added. "Mountain man with a baby horse trailing after him like a lost pup." Kent's shoulders tensed, but he kept his face neutral as he gathered his supplies. The sooner he could finish his business and leave town, the better. The spring sun was high overhead when he made his way to the blacksmith shop at the edge of town. Bear Runner, the Comanche farrier, looked up from his forge as Kent approached. His dark eyes held neither judgment nor amusement, just quiet observation. "Heard about the foal," Bear Runner said, setting aside his tools. "Should take a look at those hooves." Kent nodded gruffly. At the livery, they walked in silence to the stable. The foal nickered softly when it saw Kent, pressing against the stall door. Bear Runner knelt beside it, his movements slow and deliberate as he lifted each hoof in turn. His practiced hands found the signs of wear and damage that told their own story. "Mari was run hard," he said finally, straightening up. "Too hard. For one carrying a foal. Thieves don't care about such things." He met Kent's eyes. "This little one saw something terrible. Is why it clings to you now. Feels safe." Kent shifted uncomfortably. "I ain't looking to be nobody's sanctuary." Bear Runner's expression remained neutral. "Sometimes we do not choose such things." As evening approached, Kent returned to the livery to settle his mule for the night. He had intended to find a room at the boarding house, but the foal's crying started the moment he turned to leave. The pitiful sounds echoed through the stable, setting other horses nickering in response. Kent tried to walk away, made it halfway, down the street before the cries became too much to bear. With a muttered curse, he turned back, gathering some hay in an empty stall next to the foals. The crying stopped as soon as he settled down, replaced by soft sounds of contentment. "Well, ain't this a sight?" Samantha's voice came from the stable entrance. She carried a covered basket, and the smell of fresh bread and stew made Kent's stomach rumble. "Mother sent supper," said. "Anyone keeping watch over one of God's creatures deserves a hot meal." "Ain't keeping watch," Kent grumbled, but accepted the basket anyway. "Just couldn't sleep with all that carrying on." Samantha smiled knowingly. "Mother says the Lord works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he sends us exactly what we need, even if we don't recognize it at first." Kent scowled around a mouthful of stew, but didn't argue. The food was too good to waste breath on protests. "Thank you," Samantha said softly, "for staying with it. Good night, Mr. Carter." Long before dawn, Kent packed his things quietly. The foal was sleeping soundly. Perfect time to slip away unnoticed. He led his mule out carefully, holding his breath until he reached the street. He hadn't gone 20 paces when he heard it. The crash of a stall door flying open, followed by the clatter of uneven hooves on wooden floors. The foal burst out of the livery stable, rushing to catch up with him despite its wobbling legs. "Now see here," Kent started, but movement caught his eye. Early risers were already about. The baker, the telegraph operator, a few ranch hands. All stopped to watch the scene unfold. "Looks like you've got yourself a shadow, Carter," someone called out. "More like that colt's got itself a master," another added. The foal pressed close to Kent's leg, trembling but determined. More townspeople were gathering, drawn by the commotion. Kent could hear their murmured conversations, see the pointing and head shaking. "Never seen anything like it?" a woman whispered loudly to her companion. "Has to be a reason," another responded. "Everything happens for a reason." Kent stood frozen in the middle of the street, the curious faces of the townsfolk and the warm press of the foal against his leg, making escape impossible. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink, casting long shadows down the empty street, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed to welcome the new day. The morning sun climbed higher as Reverend Colton made his way through town, his weathered Bible tucked under one arm. He paused at the livery stable, drawn by the gathering crowd around Kent and the persistent foal. The Reverend's stern face softened as he approached, kneeling despite his age to examine the young horse. His fingers traced gently through the foal's coat, pushing aside the fuzzy hair. Suddenly, he straightened, his expression grave. "There's something here you all need to see," he announced, voice carrying across the murmuring crowd. "Look here, beneath the foal markings. A brand, faded but clear, United States Cavalry." The crowd pressed closer as Reverend Colton pointed out the old mark. "I recognize this brand from when the Army seized horses from Comanche herds last spring. They claimed it was their right under federal law, but we all know those horses were bred by native families for generations." Kent shifted uncomfortably as whispers rippled through the growing audience. He had sought only supplies and solitude, not to become entangled in old grievances between settlers, soldiers, and native peoples. The Mare must have been one of those taken, Bear Runner said, quietly from the edge of the crowd. His deep voice carried weight despite its softness. Many fine horses were lost that day, some pregnant with foals. "Then by rights, this colt belongs to Bear Runner's people," someone called out. "No, it came from our Mare," Mrs. Hamlin countered firmly. "The one stolen in the raid months ago. Providence has brought it home." "The Army won't see it that way," warned the telegraph operator. "They'll claim any offspring of their branded stock." The arguments followed Kent into the mercantile, as he tried to purchase more supplies. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about the foal's rightful ownership, while Kent wanted nothing to do with any of it. The cavalry brand makes it government property, insisted the store owner. That brand was put there unlawfully, argued a ranch hand. The Hanlons lost their mare fair and square, another customer added. They should get first claim on its foal. Kent gripped the counter, knuckles white. Ain't nobody's property but its own, he growled. It follows me of its own choosing. Samantha appeared at his elbow, her face concerned. Mr. Carter never asked for any of this, she said firmly to the gathered crowd. He showed kindness to a lost creature, nothing more. Leave him be. But Kent could feel the weight of expectations settling around him like a heavy blanket. Where once he had been merely the strange mountain man who kept to himself, now he had become the center of a brewing storm. Every face that turned to him seemed to demand answers he didn't have. The spring day stretched long as Kent finished his business in town. Shadows lengthened across the packed dirt of the street as he loaded the last supplies onto his mule. The foal stood nearby, watching his every move with those trust-filled eyes that made his chest ache. Best head back up the mountain, he muttered. To himself. Let them sort out their quarrels without me. He didn't bother with a rope for the foal. There was no need. As he turned his mule toward the trail that would lead them out of town, the young horse fell into step beside him as naturally as breathing. Its uneven gait had steadied some with rest and food, though it still wobbled on the steeper parts of the path. Behind them, the town's voices faded into evening birdsong. Kent tried not to think about the brand hidden beneath the foal's fuzzy coat, or about the arguments his unexpected companion had stirred up. He had spent years building walls between himself and the world's troubles. Now, this small creature had somehow led him right into the middle of them. The foal nickered softly as they climbed, pressing close when the trail narrowed. Its trust was a tangible thing, as real as the cooling mountain air or the crunch of hooves on stone. Kent found himself adjusting his pace to match its shorter stride, pausing when it needed rest. Ain't looking to own you, he told it gruffly as they neared his cabin. Ain't looking to solve nobody's problems neither. The foal simply shook its scraggly mane and followed him home, as if the mountain man's words meant nothing at all. As if it had already decided where it belonged, no matter what brand marked its hide or what claims others might make. Kent tied the foal to a sturdy post outside his mountain shack, determined to keep his distance. The rough-hewn logs of his cabin offered familiar solitude, but the foal's plaintive whinnies pierced the quiet mountain air. "Hush up out there," he muttered, stoking the fire in his small stove. The cries grew more desperate as evening approached. Something in the sound, high and lonely, reminded Kent of another voice from long ago. His son Timothy had cried like that during the fever. Before, Kent shook his head hard, trying to scatter the memory, but the foal wouldn't be silenced. Its calls echoed off the mountainside, tugging at something deep in Kent's chest. With a curse, he grabbed his medical kit and stomped outside. "Ain't doing this because I care," he told the trembling animal. "Just can't stand your racket." The foal stood quiet as Kent cleaned the cuts on its legs, barely flinching when he applied stinging medicine. Its dark eyes watched him with complete trust. Kent found himself speaking softly, explaining each step like he used to do when doctoring the ranch horses. Before everything changed, he mixed a mash of oats from his supplies, telling himself it was just to keep the animal quiet. But watching the foal eat with such grateful eagerness made his throat tight. Days passed in an uneasy routine. Kent tended the foal's wounds each morning and evening, noting how the animal grew steadier on its feet. Though he tried to maintain his gruff distance, he caught himself checking on it through the cabin window, making sure it had shade in the Afternoon heat. The sound of hoofbeats on the trail surprised him one afternoon. Samantha Hanlon appeared around the bend, riding a borrowed bay horse. Her cheeks were flushed from the climb, a basket secured to her saddle. "Land's sake," she exclaimed, dismounting to examine the foal. "Look how it's flourished under your care, Mr. Carter. The wounds are healing clean, and it's gained weight already." Kent shuffled his feet. "Ain't done much. Just basic doctoring. Basic doctoring has made all the difference." Samantha ran her hands over the foal's improving coat. "You've given it a chance at life." The evening air cooled as Kent prepared. Pot of rabbit stew. Samantha set out bread and preserve from her basket, making herself at home at his rough table. "Surviving means looking forward," she said quietly over their meal. "Caring for the living, not just mourning those we've lost." Kent's spoon clattered against his bowl. "Don't presume to know about my losses, Miss Hamlin. My wife Sarah and my boy." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry," Samantha said softly. "I spoke out of turn." Kent drew a ragged breath. "No, I'm the one should apologize. Shouldn't snap at kindness." Just then, the foal's nose pushed through the open window, snuffling at Kent's sleeve. Despite himself, Kent found his anger melting as the animal's whiskers tickled his arm. Samantha's gentle laugh broke. The tension. Dark clouds gathered as they finished eating, bringing the smell of snow. Thunder rolled across the peaks, making the foal stamp nervously at its post. "Storm's coming fast," Kent observed. "Won't be safe riding back tonight." "I don't suppose." Samantha hesitated. "Is your spare bunk still made up?" Kent nodded stiffly. "Been a while since anyone used it, but the blankets are clean." The storm broke as they settled in for the evening. Snow fell thick outside the windows while they sat in the warm circle of lamplight. Kent added wood to the stove, watching Samantha mend a tear in her riding skirt. The foal's occasional nickering mixed with the whisper of falling snow. Kent couldn't help thinking how the cabin felt different with another person there. Less like a fortress against memory, and more like something else he couldn't name. "Seems like Providence keeps sending me burdens I never asked for," he muttered, more to himself than Samantha. "Perhaps they're not burdens," she replied quietly. "Perhaps they're gifts you didn't know you needed." Kent had no answer for that. He busied himself checking the windows were latched against the storm, while thoughts he'd rather avoid stirred in his mind. The foal's trust, Samantha's kindness, they were cracks in the walls he built around his grief. Part of him wanted to shore those walls up higher, but another part, one he thought long buried, whispered that maybe it was time to let them crumble. The spring thaw turned the mountain creek into a rushing torrent. Melting snow fed the waters until they spilled over the banks, creating pools where new grass sprouted in tender patches. Kent watched the foal nibble at these first green shoots, its coat beginning to shine with better care. "Time you learned some manners," he told the animal one morning, retrieving a length of rope from his shed. The foal eyed him warily as he approached with the lead line. At first touch of the rope, the young horse reared back, eyes rolling white with fear. Kent held firm but gentle, speaking in low tones. "Easy now. Ain't gonna hurt you none." The foal danced away, tugging against the line until sweat darkened its flanks. Kent waited patiently, letting it fight until exhaustion brought stillness. Then he ran his hands over its neck, speaking softly like he used to do with frightened colts on his old ranch. Day by day, the foal learned to trust the rope, following Kent's lead with growing confidence. He found himself talking to it more, explaining each new lesson as if the animal could understand every word. One afternoon, the crunch of hooves on the trail announced Bear Runner's arrival. The Comanche blacksmith dismounted with fluid grace, his dark eyes taking in the scene, Kent working with the foal in the spring sunshine. "The little one learns well," Bear Runner observed, leaning against the split-rail fence. Kent nodded, starting to trust some. Still spooks easy, though. Like someone else I know, Bear Runner said with a slight smile. He watched Kent's work. In silence for a while, before speaking again. I remember your wife, Sarah. She had healing hands. Kent's shoulders tensed at the mention of her name. When fever swept through our winter camp, Bear Runner continued, she came without fear, treated our children like her own. The mothers still speak of her kindness. Sarah never could turn away from suffering, Kent said roughly, even when it put her at risk. Our people respected you both more than you knew. Bear Runner's words carried weight. Some said she had medicine spirit in her heart. That night, Kent's dreams were filled with Sarah's voice, Timothy's laughter. He saw them as they were before the bitter winter. Sarah tending her herb garden, their son chasing butterflies in the summer grass. He woke with tears on his face, the old grief raw and fresh. A soft nickering drew him outside. The foal stood in the pre-dawn light, its outline ghost-like in the mist. As Kent sank down on a fallen log, the young horse approached carefully. To his surprise, it lowered its head into his lap like a child seeking comfort. Kent's hand shook as he stroked its forelock. Reckon we both know something about loss, he whispered. The days lengthened as spring took hold in the high country. Samantha's visits became regular as sunshine, her borrowed horse knowing the trail to Kent's cabin by heart. She always brought something, fresh bread still warm from baking, packets of vegetable seeds, a jar of preserved peaches. Kent found himself watching for her arrival, noticing how the foal's ears pricked up at the sound of her voice. She helped him plant a small kitchen garden, laughing when the curious colt tried to eat the tender seedlings. One evening, they sat on the porch steps, watching the foal graze in the last golden light. Samantha's shoulder brushed against Kent's as she turned to study his face. What do you see when you look in its eyes? She asked softly. Kent was quiet for a long moment. Innocence, he finally said. The kind that survives loss. Keeps on trusting, despite everything. Peace settled over the mountain as spring deepened into early summer. Kent dared to think perhaps Providence had led him to something healing, after all. Then came the night that shattered the quiet. Kent woke to the foal's terrified squealing, and the sound of boots on gravel. Grabbing his rifle, he burst out the cabin door to find Jake Wheeler, a local ranch hand with a reputation for trouble, trying to lead the struggling colt away. Let it go, Wheeler, Kent's voice cut through the darkness. The rifle gleamed in the starlight. Now, Kent, Wheeler's words dripped false friendship. Ain't no call for guns. Just taking what the Army's owed. Army ain't owed nothing here. Kent's finger tightened on the trigger. Back away slow. Wheeler hesitated, then made a grab for the foal's rope. Kent's rifle cracked twice, sending bullets whining over the thief's head. Wheeler dropped the rope and ran, scrambling onto his horse and galloping away into the night. Kent's hands were steady as he checked the foal for injury, but his mind raced. Wheeler wouldn't be the last to try claiming the colt. Others would come, drawn by greed or misguided justice. The peaceful sanctuary of his mountain home suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable. The foal pressed against him in the darkness, trembling. Kent stroked its neck, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his palm. Don't worry, little one, he murmured. Won't let them take you. But doubt gnawed at him as he watched the trail where Wheeler had disappeared. How long could he protect the innocent creature that had somehow worked its way into his heart? The morning sun cast long shadows across the town's main street as Kent led the foal down from his mountain sanctuary. Every few steps, the young horse tossed its head, showing off its gleaming coat and the new strength in its legs. Gone was the scrawny, trembling creature that had followed Kent months ago. In its place pranced a spirited yearling, eyes bright with intelligence and trust. Townsfolk emerged from shops and houses, drawn by the clip-clop of hooves on packed dirt. Children pressed forward, pointing and grinning. Even the most hardened. Ranch hands nodded with approval at the transformation. "Would you look at that?" someone called out. Kent's foundling turned out right handsome. More voices joined in, offering praise and wonder. The foal seemed to sense their admiration, lifting its feet higher and arching its neck like a circus performer. Kent felt heat rise in his cheeks at the attention, but he couldn't help noticing how different these reactions were from the mockery that had greeted them before. Outside the mercantile, Samantha stood watching, her face glowing with pride. She stepped forward to stroke the foal's gleaming neck, then looked up at Kent with knowing eyes. "Seems to me this little one isn't the only one who's changed," she whispered, just loud enough for Kent to hear. "Some creatures come into our lives to heal us as much as we heal them." Kent ducked his head, mumbling something about just doing what needed doing, but he couldn't deny the warmth that spread through his chest at her words. Reverent Colton made his way through the gathering crowd, his weathered face thoughtful as he studied both man and horse. The morning light caught the silver in his hair as he raised his hands for attention. "Friends," he called out, his voice carrying across the street, "I believe we're witnessing the Lord's own handiwork here. Sometimes God sends his creatures to guide men back to mercy, just as surely as he sent a whale to teach Jonah about compassion." The townsfolk murmured in agreement, several women wiping at their eyes. Kent shifted uncomfortably in his boots, but something in the preacher's words rang true in his heart. Bear Runner stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, nodding slowly. "The foal carries many hopes," he said. "For the Hamlin women who lost their mare, for my people who remember old wrongs, for men who forgot how to trust." His dark eyes met Kent's. "Perhaps it can help build bridges between all our peoples." The gathering took on the feel of an impromptu celebration. Mrs. Hamlin brought out fresh-baked cookies for the children. The blacksmith offered Kent his finest currycomb as a gift. Even crusty old Pete from the saloon admitted the foal was something special, right enough. As the afternoon waned, Kent led the foal to the livery stable. The animal followed willingly now, no longer afraid of the wooden stalls. Kent made sure it had fresh hay and water, then sank down on a bale of straw, overwhelmed by the day's events. The stable was quiet, except for the soft sounds of horses settling for the night. Lamplight filtered through the windows, casting golden patterns on the floor. Kent found himself thinking about Sarah and Timothy, but for the first time in years, the memories brought more comfort than pain. Slowly, he lowered himself to his knees beside his bunk. The words came haltingly at first, rusty from disuse. "Lord, been a long time since I talked to you proper." He cleared his throat. "Reckon I owe you thanks for this second chance you sent. Didn't deserve it, but..." His voice caught. "Thank you for not giving up on this old sinner." A small sound made him turn. Samantha stood in the doorway, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Their eyes met in the dim light, and neither spoke for a long moment. Then she smiled through her tears and quietly withdrew, leaving Kent to finish his prayers in peace. The town seemed to breathe easier in the days that followed. Settlers and Comanche traders alike stopped to admire the foal, sharing stories and memories of horses they had known. Children brought carrots and apples, delighting in how gently the young horse took treats from their small hands. But under the peaceful surface, whispers began to circulate. The telegraph operator mentioned increased army traffic on the wire. Travelers brought news of cavalry patrols, asking questions about branded stock. Even as Kent watched his foal charm another group of admirers, he couldn't shake the feeling that their newfound peace might soon be tested. Dawn painted the sky in pale streaks, when the first rumble of hoofbeats echoed through the sleeping town. Kent had just finished feeding the foal its morning oats when dust clouds rose at the edge of Main Street. Through the haze, a column of blue-coated cavalry soldiers appeared, their brass buttons catching the early light. The commander, Captain Harlan, sat tall in his saddle, his face stern beneath his regulation hat. Behind him, 6 troopers formed a rigid line, their horses stamping impatiently in the dirt. Townsfolk emerged from their homes and shops, gathering in whispered clusters to watch. Captain Harlan pulled a folded paper from his coat and cleared his throat. "By authority of the United States Army," he announced, his voice cutting through the morning air, "I am here to reclaim stolen government property and arrest one Kent Carter for theft." The shock rippled through the crowd. Kent stood his ground by the livery stable, one hand on the foal's neck. The young horse pressed close against him, trembling at the unfamiliar voices and clanking equipment. "This animal bears our brand," Harlan continued, waving the warrant. "The law is clear. Step aside, Carter." "No." Kent's voice was quiet but firm. "This foal came to me half dead. Your brand or not, you abandoned it to die." Samantha pushed through the crowd, her face flushed. "Please, Captain. Kent saved this creature. Surely that counts for something." The townsfolk shifted uneasily, their earlier support crumbling under the weight of federal authority. Someone muttered about not wanting trouble with the army. Another whispered about Kent bringing this on himself. "This is your final warning," Captain Harlan declared. "Surrender the animal and submit to arrest, or we will take you by force." The tension stretched tight as a fiddle string. Then suddenly, little Tommy Jenkins broke free from his mother's grip, darting across the street toward a stray cat. The foal, already nervous, reared up with a terrified whinny. Its hooves flashed dangerously close to the boy's head as he scrambled past. "My lord!" Mrs. Jenkins screamed. Other voices joined in. "That beast nearly killed my boy. Carter's stubbornness has gone too far. Think of the children's safety." 2 soldiers seized Kent's arms while he was distracted by the commotion. He struggled briefly, but the fight drained from him as he watched his neighbors turn away. There, faces closed and cold. Only Samantha remained, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This isn't right," she pleaded with Captain Harlan. "He's a good man. The foal trusts him." The commander ignored her, supervising as his men clapped iron shackles around Kent's wrists. The chains clinked heavily as they marched him down the dusty street toward the jail. Each step felt like another dream crumbling to ash. Sheriff Wilson unlocked the cell door, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Sorry, Ken. Law's the law." The iron bars clanged shut with terrible finality. Kent sank onto the thin bunk, his shoulders slumped. Through the small window, he could see the townspeople dispersing, hurrying back to their normal lives as if eager to forget him. Hours crawled past. The afternoon sun cast prison bar shadows across the cell floor. Kent sat motionless, feeling the weight of betrayal settle over him like a heavy blanket. All the trust he'd rebuilt, all the connections he'd started to form, gone like morning mist as dusk gathered. A familiar sound broke through his dark thoughts. A soft nickering came from outside the jail. The foal had found him. Its hooves clicked on the wooden sidewalk as it paced back and forth beneath his window. "Get on home now," Kent called roughly, his voice thick. "Ain't nothing here for you." No more, but the foal stayed, occasionally whinnying as if to remind him it hadn't given up. In the growing darkness, its faithful presence was both comfort and torment. Kent pressed his forehead against the cool bars, listening to the steady rhythm of his only friend's movements. Night settled over the town like a black curtain. Most windows went dark, but still the foal remained, its restless hoofbeats a counterpoint to Kent's troubled thoughts. He remembered how it had followed him down that muddy trail months ago, refusing to be driven away. Now here it was again, standing guard outside his cell. Loyal despite everything. Kent closed his eyes, feeling more alone than he had in years. The cell walls seemed to close in around him, as confining as the walls of grief he built after losing his family. But this time, there was no escaping into the mountains, no hiding from the pain of human connection. All he could do was listen to the foal's soft sounds in the darkness and wonder how it had all gone so wrong. The night pressed, heavy against the jailhouse windows. Kent slumped on the hard wooden bench, his shoulders curved inward like a wounded animal. The foal's soft nickering drifted through the bars, constant as a heartbeat in the darkness. His own whispers echoed in the empty cell, fragments of thoughts, spilling out without purpose. Should have left you be, he muttered. Should have just walked on by. But even as the words left his lips, something stirred in his memory. A flash of moonlight on trampled grass, the sound of labored breathing, the smell of blood and sweat mixing with spring mud. The images rushed back, sharp and clear as lightning. He had been tracking deer that night, months ago, when he heard the desperate sounds. Following them, he found the Mare collapsed in a narrow valley, her sides heaving. Hoof prints told the story. Thieves had run her too hard, too far, then left her to die when she could not go on. Kent had knelt beside her, stroking her neck as life faded from her eyes. He remembered digging the grave alone, working through the night to give her a proper burial, speaking soft words over the fresh earth. Dear Lord, Kent whispered now, his voice breaking. That's why. The foal had been there, hiding in the shadows. It had watched him tend to its mother, witnessed his final act of mercy. That was why it followed him down the mountain trail. It remembered his scent from that night, recognized him as the one who had shown kindness when others brought only cruelty. The revelation hit Kent like a physical blow. His chest tightened, and tears he had held back for years suddenly broke free. Great, racking sobs shook his body as grief for his own lost family mingled with the memory of the dying Mare and her orphaned colt. He pressed his hands against his face, trying to muffle the sounds, but they tore from him anyway, raw and unstoppable. The jail door creaked open softly. Footsteps crossed the floor, hesitant at first, then swift and sure. Through his tears, Kent saw Samantha kneeling beside the cell, her face pale in the darkness. Kent, she whispered, reaching through the bars. To take his trembling hand. I'm here. You are not alone. I cannot, he choked down. I cannot bear it anymore. The weight of it all. Then let it go, Samantha urged, her fingers tightening around his. Stop trying to carry this pain by yourself. God did not send that foal to you by accident. He's already working to heal what was broken. Kent drew a shuddering breath. I am so weary, Samantha. Weary of walls and shadows. Weary of running from memories. Then stay and face them, she said. Stay and let love back in. The foal nickered again, as if adding its own plea to hers. Kent looked toward the window where starlight filtered through the iron bars. I buried its mother, he confessed quietly. That night, I spoke words over her grave that I never said for Sarah and little James. I was too angry then, too lost in darkness. Samantha's other hand reached through to touch his face, wiping away tears. Speak them now, she whispered. It is never too late for prayer. Kent's voice trembled as he began. Dear Father in heaven, he faltered, but Samantha's steady presence gave him strength to continue. Watch over those I've lost. Guard their souls until we meet again. Amen, Samantha breathed, and then she too began to pray. Her clear voice filled the cell with words of hope and comfort, of mercy and renewal. Kent found himself joining in, their prayers weaving together like streams meeting in the mountains dot through the long hours until dawn. They prayed and spoke softly. Kent told her about Sarah's laugh, about James's first steps, about the 1,000 small memories he had locked away in grief. Samantha listened, her hand never leaving his, while outside the window, the foal kept its faithful vigil dot as the first gray light of morning touched the eastern sky, Kent felt something shift inside him, like ice breaking up on a frozen river. The pain was still there, but it no longer threatened to drown him. In its place, he felt the first fragile stirrings of peace. "The foal knew," he said quietly, watching dawn creep across the cell floor. "It knew I would understand its loss, that I would not turn it away, no matter how hard I tried." "God's creatures sometimes see clearer than we do," Samantha replied. "They know where healing can be found." Morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the wooden benches packed with townsfolk. The room smelled of dust and tension, with only the soft creak of floorboards breaking the silence. Outside, the foal's occasional nickering drifted in, a reminder of why they had gathered. The army commander, Captain Harlan, stood rigid before the judge's bench, his brass buttons gleaming. "This animal is United States government property," he declared, voice sharp as a cavalry saber. "Its markings clearly show descent from a registered army mar. The law is plain on this matter." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kent sat stone-faced at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly before him. Samantha touched his shoulder gently, but he didn't move. Mrs. Hanlon rose next, her black widow's dress rustling as she approached the front. Though her face was lined with age, she held herself straight and proud. "That foal comes from our prize, Mari, stolen from our ranch 6 months ago," she testified, her voice steady. "My late husband bred that bloodline for 20 years. We'd know those markings anywhere. Can you prove ownership?" the judge asked, leaning forward. "Our brand was there before the thieves tried burning it away," Mrs. Hanlon replied. "But more than that, I know in my heart this is our colt. The Lord brought it back to us through Mr. Carter's kindness." Bear Runner stepped forward next, his powerful blacksmith's frame somehow gentle in its movement. "Your Honor," he began, "that Mari was taken from my people's herd years ago, when the army broke the tree at Medicine Creek. We bred those horses for generations before any cavalry came west." Captain Harlan's lip curled. "The word of a savage against United States Army records." "Watch your tongue, Captain," Reverend Colton interrupted, rising from his seat. The old preacher's stern face matched the commander's glare. "I've served this territory 30 years, and I remember those broken promises. Bear Runner speaks truth." The judge gestured for Reverend Colton to approach. "You have something to add, Reverend?" "I do indeed." The preacher's voice filled the courthouse. "The good book tells us a righteous man regards the life of his beast. I've watched Kent Carter nurse that foal back from death's door. That's true stewardship, not theft. The Lord chose him to heal that creature, just as that creature's healing him." Whispers scattered through the room. Kent stared at his hands, uncomfortable with so many eyes upon him. The weight of judgment pressed down like mountain snow. "If I may speak, Your Honor?" Samantha's clear voice cut through the murmuring as she stood. The judge nodded, and she moved to the front, her steps measured and sure. "I've witnessed something remarkable these past weeks," she began. "That foal didn't just follow Kent down from the mountains. It led him back to life." She turned, meeting Kent's eyes for a moment before continuing. "I've seen him pray again for the first time in years. I've watched hardness melt from his heart like spring ice. That little horse brought him healing he never asked for, but desperately needed. Her voice softened. Last night in his cell, Kent spoke of mercy, how he buried that foal's mother when others had left her to die. How that act of kindness formed a bond neither of them chose, but both needed. If that's not God's providence, I don't know what is." The courthouse fell silent. Even Captain Harlan seemed to have no ready response. Kent felt tears threatening and blinked hard, overwhelmed by Samantha's words, laying bare his heart before the whole town. The judge studied each face before him, the proud army officer, the dignified widow, the steady blacksmith, the passionate preacher, the gentle schoolteacher, and the weathered mountain man. His gaze lingered on Kent last, measuring something only he could see. "This case touches more than simple property law," the judge said finally. "It speaks to broken treaties and broken hearts, to theft and healing, to God's hand working in ways we might not expect." He straightened in his chair. "I will consider all testimony carefully and deliver my ruling at sunrise tomorrow." As the crowd began to disperse, Kent remained seated, feeling the weight of many lives and many hopes pressed into the fate of one small horse. Samantha's hand found his again, warm and steady as sunrise. "Whatever comes," she whispered, "you're not alone anymore." Through the window, the foal's soft nickering drifted in like a prayer. Night settled over the town like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a stillness broken only by the soft pawing of hooves against packed earth. Samantha sat on the jailhouse steps, her shawl pulled tight against the evening chill. The foal stood nearby, its coat silver in the moonlight, refusing to leave the building where Kent was held. Inside the cell, Kent's boots scraped against the floor as he paced. Each step echoed through the empty building, matching the rhythm of Samantha's worried heart. She reached out to stroke the foal's velvet nose, drawing comfort from its steady presence. Heavy footsteps approached, and Bear Runner's broad figure emerged from the shadows. He carried 2 tin cups of steaming coffee, offering one to Samantha. "The stars are bright tonight," he said, lowering himself to sit beside her. "Good medicine for troubled spirits." "Thank you," Samantha murmured, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. The foal nickered softly, nudging Bear Runner's shoulder in greeting. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching their breath mist in the cool air. Finally, Bear Runner spoke, his voice thoughtful. "My grandfather taught me that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from keeping a gift, but from knowing when to return it." Samantha turned to study his face in the dim light. "What do you mean?" "The foal has done its work," Bear Runner explained, gesturing toward the jail. "It led Kent back to life, back to people, back to faith." He paused, smiling slightly. "Sometimes a gift serves its purpose and must be set free, like an eagle that heals a broken wing." The foal pressed closer to Samantha, its warmth steady against her side. "Do you think," she hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you think Kent could ever love again, after losing so much?" Bear Runner's dark eyes crinkled with knowing wisdom. "Sister," he said gently, "love already rides beside him. It followed him down from the mountains, just as surely as this little horse did." He nodded toward her, his meaning clear. Samantha felt her cheeks warm, but before she could respond, the first pale light of dawn began creeping over the eastern horizon. People emerged from their homes, gathering in the street, their faces anxious with anticipation. The courthouse doors opened, and the crowd moved forward like a tide. Inside, Kent stood straight back before the judge's bench, his face weathered but calm. Captain Harlan and his soldiers lined one wall, while Mrs. Hanlon, Reverend Colton, and Bear Runner took their places near the front. Samantha slipped in quietly, the foal's soft nickering drifting through the open windows. The judge cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the hushed room. "I have considered this matter carefully," he began, his voice carrying to every corner. "The claims before us touch on property, yes, but also on justice, mercy, and the hand of Providence." He lifted a sheet of paper, adjusting his spectacles. "The Army's claim rests on a brand that was itself placed unlawfully, violating treaties with the Comanche people. Mrs. Hanlon's claim, while heartfelt, cannot be fully proven due to the actions of thieves." Captain Harlan shifted, his sword clanking against his chair, but the judge held up his hand for silence. "However, the law also recognizes true stewardship, the care and nurturing of God's creatures. Mr. Kent Carter, though he never sought this responsibility, has demonstrated such stewardship in full measure. Through his actions, this foal has not only survived but thrived. The judge's gaze swept the room. Therefore, I rule that the Army has no legal claim to this animal. Furthermore, I grant full ownership rights to Kent Carter, recognizing both his care and the profound bond that Providence has clearly established between man and horse. The courthouse erupted in cheers. Women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs, while men clapped each other on the back. Captain Harlan's face darkened, but he gave a curt nod, leading his soldiers out with military precision. Samantha rushed to her mother, tears of relief streaming down both their faces as they embraced. "Thank you," Mrs. Hamlin whispered, "for helping Kent find his way back." Kent stood motionless, as if unable to comprehend the judge's words. Bear Runner pressed the rope into his hands, guiding him toward the door. Outside, the foal pranced in. The morning light, its coat gleaming with health and spirit. With hands that trembled slightly, Kent took hold of the rope. The foal pressed its head against his chest, and for a moment, man and horse stood still in the dawn light, their shadows. Merging on the dusty street, the crowd spilled out of the courthouse, their joy filling the morning air. Kent led the foal forward into the growing daylight, rope held loose in his weathered hands, each step carrying them both towards something new and unforeseen. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Kent stood motionless, the foal's rope heavy in his hands. The crowd's jubilant voices faded to murmurs as he slowly sank to one knee, his weathered face etched with emotion. Before him stood Bear Runner, tall and dignified in the golden light. Kent's voice came rough, but clear. "This colt," he said, holding out the rope with trembling fingers, "it should go back to its people, your people." The words fell into sudden silence as townsfolk drew sharp breaths. Mrs. Hamlin pressed a handkerchief to her lips and reverend. Colton bowed his head in prayer. Bear Runner didn't move for a long moment. His dark eyes studied Kent's face, reading the truth written there, not just obligation, but genuine sacrifice. The blacksmith's broad shoulders straightened as morning light caught the silver at his temples. "Brother," Bear Runner said finally, his voice carrying across the hushed street, "I see what this costs you." He reached down, but instead of taking the rope, he wrapped Kent's fingers more firmly around it. "But you are its people." The words rang with quiet authority. Kent's eyes widened as Bear Runner continued. "The Creator sends guides to lost souls. This foal found you in the mountains. It chose you." He gestured to the colt, which stood pressing against Kent's shoulder, its eyes bright and trusting. Some bonds cannot be broken by law or blood. They are written in the heart. The crowd remained silent, hanging on every word. Then someone sniffled, and another whispered, "Amen." Like a wave, understanding rippled through the gathered townsfolk. These weren't just pretty words. They were truth made visible in flesh and bone, in man and horse standing together in morning light. Samantha stepped forward from where she'd been standing with her mother. Her skirts rustled against the wooden steps as she placed her hand gently on Kent's arm. The touch seemed to break something loose in him. He looked up at her, his face naked with emotion. "I don't deserve any of this," Kent whispered, his voice harsh with unshed tears. The words carried the weight of years spent alone, of grief held too long, of grace unexpected and overwhelming. Samantha's fingers tightened on his arm as she leaned close. "None of us do," she replied softly, her words meant for him alone, though they seemed to echo in the hushed street. "But grace gives it anyway." Kent's breath caught in his throat. The foal chose that moment to nuzzle his chest, its warm breath carrying the scent of sweet grass and morning dew. The creature's hooves stamped the packed earth with new vigor, as if declaring its own certainty about where it belonged. Slowly, Kent rose to his feet. The rope hung loose in his hand now, more a symbol than a necessity. The foal needed no tether to stay by his side. Samantha's hand remained on his arm, steady and sure as sunrise. Together, they began walking down the street. The crowd parted like water, faces shining with wonder at the sight. Here was something pure, something that spoke of redemption and second chances, of healing deeper than words could reach. Children pointed and whispered. Women wiped tears from their cheeks. Even the men who'd once mocked the mountain man now stood respectfully silent, hats held to their chests. They recognized what they were seeing. Not just a man and a horse, but hope made visible. The foal pranced. Beside them, its coat gleaming with health, its steps light with trust. Each hoofbeat seemed to echo Bear Runner's words. You are its people. You are its people. A rhythm of belonging that had nothing to do with brands or bloodlines. Kent walked, straight and tall now, as if some great weight had finally fallen from his shoulders. The morning light caught in his eyes, turning them from storm gray to silver. Beside him, Samantha's face glowed with quiet joy, her hand still resting on his arm like a promise. The whole town watched them go, bearing witness to something both ordinary and miraculous. A man, a woman, and a foal walking down a dusty street, but also grace made manifest. Love restored. Family found in the most unexpected places. Bear Runner stood on the courthouse steps, arms crossed, satisfaction plain on his face. He had seen this coming, perhaps from the first moment the foal chose Kent. Sometimes the heart knows what the head must learn slowly, that healing comes in its own time, that love finds its own way home. Kent's hands moved steadily as he hammered, fresh nails into the weathered fence posts. Spring sunshine warmed his shoulders while the foal galloped in playful circles through the mountain meadow. The sound of Samantha's laughter rang clear as crystal as she watched the colt's antics, her arms full of splintery boards. That one's got spirit to spare, she said, setting down her load. The foal kicked up its heels, sending clumps of grass flying. Kent found himself smiling. Something that came easier these days. Mrs. Hanlon's wagon rattled up the trail later that afternoon, the good smell of fresh-baked pies drifting on the breeze. She settled herself on Kent's porch, smoothing her apron, as she watched him work. Lord above, Kent Carter, she said, wonder in her voice. You're like a different man entirely, as if some great burden's been lifted right off your shoulders. Kent nodded, knowing she spoke true. The bitterness that had weighed him down for so long seemed to have melted away like winter snow dog riders appeared regularly now, neighboring ranchers who'd once given his cabin a wide berth. They brought offerings, spare hay, grain, even a worn saddle blanket. Their words were gruff but kind, speaking of weather and cattle prices as if Kent had always been part of their circle. Bear Runner visited often, bringing his young nephews along. They sat in the evening shade while he showed Kent the intricate art of braiding leather reins in the traditional way. The boys chattered excitedly in Comanche, pointing out the foal's growing strength. Bear Runner translated their praise with quiet pride, as if Kent were already family. The days passed sweet and slow as honey. Each evening, Samantha stayed longer by the firelight, her presence filling the cabin with warmth Kent had almost forgotten could exist. The foal's soft nickering drifted in through the open door, mingling with their voices where silence had once ruled. Kent found himself sharing stories, tales of mountain peaks and hidden valleys, of elk trails and eagle nests. Gradually, carefully, he began speaking of Sarah and little Thomas too. The memories still ached, but somehow telling Samantha about them felt right. She listened with gentle understanding, her hand sometimes finding his when words grew difficult. They would have loved this place, he said one evening, watching the foal doze in the last sunlight. Sarah always wanted a proper ranch. Samantha's fingers squeezed his. Maybe she helped guide that foal to you, she said softly, to remind you that life goes on, Kent looked around at his transformed homestead. The mended fences, the cleared pasture, the fresh-swept porch where friends now gathered. Something that felt very much like peace settled in his chest. Summer painted the mountains in wildflower gold, brightening Kent's world with new promise. The foal, no longer the scrawny creature that had followed him months ago, pranced beneath its first saddle, coat gleaming like polished copper in the morning light. "Easy now," Kent murmured, leading it in gentle circles. His touch was patient, born from hours of careful training. Samantha sat astride her dappled Maury nearby, her smile warm as sunshine as she watched them work. When Kent finally mounted, the foal accepted his weight like it had been waiting all along for this moment. Together, they rode alongside Samantha, up the winding trail to Miller's Ridge. The town spread below them in the valley, peaceful under the summer sky. Kent drew his horse to a halt, emotion catching in his throat. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said quietly. "Reckoned life was done giving me chances. But seems like God wasn't finished with me yet. Sent a stubborn foal to chase me down." Samantha guided her Maury closer, her eyes twinkling. "Sometimes mercy comes on 4 legs instead of 2, she said softly. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." They rode back toward town side by side, their horses' hooves raising little puffs of dust. Children spilled out of yards and doorways, running alongside the foal with delighted shouts. "Mr. Carter, look how fine it's grown." Their joy echoed off the weathered buildings, welcome replacing the old whispers. That evening, lamplight cast warm shadows in the Hanlon Ranch kitchen. Kent sat at the worn table with Samantha and her mother, peace settling over him like a familiar blanket. Through the open window came the soft sounds of the foal dozing in the paddock. Kent bowed his head, surprising himself by speaking grace aloud. His voice carried steady and sure, giving thanks for second chances and hearts renewed. When the prayer ended, he kept his eyes closed a moment longer. "I know why you came," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. Outside, as if in answer, the foal nickered softly under the star-filled sky. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.